Whenever the newest and most competent computer components are released to the public, so are the video games that fully utilize their potential. And with leading hardware manufacturers competing to push out the highest performing parts for the best price almost yearly, it's clear why the gaming industry has been consistently experiencing a technological incline. These games are created to push the boundaries of what PCs can render and display at high refresh rates. For those looking to upgrade their rig, look at the recommended requirements of these most graphically demanding games to draw inspiration. The third chapter in the Total War Warhammer series unleashes the forces of chaos across the mortal world. Vast armies clash against one another in large-scale battles that include hundreds of units on screen. Rendering this level of carnage isn't as taxing as one might expect, although a powerful PC can really flex its muscles in Warhammer 3. Hitting a solid 60 FPS at 1080p will require a Ryzen 5 series CPU and a GTX 1660 Ti or equivalent. That's by no means taxing, but Warhammer 3 can become quite performance-heavy when you start scaling your resolution, texture quality, and in-game army sizes. If you want to spill blood for the Blood God at a sharp 4K resolution with 60 FPS, an NVIDIA RTX 30 or 40 series GPU is ideal. The latest entry in the Halo franchise is a faithful reimagining of the franchise, right down to the game's gorgeous art style. The PC version of Halo Infinite requires an RTX 2070 and Intel i7 9700 to hit recommended settings, both of which are rather high requirements when compared to most PC titles. Most PCs should be able to play the multiplayer component of Infinite at 1080p 60 FPS with these specs, but those looking to play the single-player or high-budget Forge maps at higher resolutions or frame rates will want a particularly high-end PC or an Xbox Series X. Control is one of the most GPU-intensive video games that released during the 8th console generation. This game's crowning achievement, at least visually, is its implementation of ray tracing. Environments and particle effects are drop-down gorgeous while RTX is on, but this comes with a heavy price, both metaphorically and literally. You need an RTX 2060 or better GPU to use ray tracing. Considering just how good RTX's implementation is here, it's well worth the GPU requirement. DLSS is also available on the RTX series of cards, increasing performance substantially with minimal graphical compromises. You can also play Control without an RTX card, greatly lowering the GPU requirement to a GTX 1660 for 60 FPS gameplay. Rasterization isn't too taxing for modern PCs, but enabling ray tracing will incur a serious performance cost for most builds. Bethesda's newest IP is also the studio's most technically impressive title to date. Starfield uses the updated Creation Engine 2 to bring Bethesda's open worlds to a modern generation, featuring better visual fidelity and physics than any previous BGS title. That visual upgrade is also reflected in Starfield's system requirements, recommending an RTX 2080 and Ryzen 5 3600. This seems to be targeting a 1080p resolution, so those looking to play at 1440p or higher will need an even stronger GPU. And with the large-scale cities on some of Starfield's planets, you'll want to upgrade your CPU as well. Few games showcase the cyberpunk art style quite as well as The Ascent, a cooperative top-down shooter that features excellent particle effects and lighting. As great as this game looks, you'll need an impressive PC to get the most out of this title. The recommended specs call for a GTX 1070 and Ryzen 5 2600, aiming for a 1080p, 60 FPS gameplay experience. Some frame dips during busy encounters are to be expected with this title, although the stuttering issues present at launch seem to be fixed now. You'll need an RTX 20 or 30 series card or an AMD equivalent for higher resolutions, frame rates, or to utilize the Ascent's gorgeous implementation of ray tracing. And if you're someone who's already played The Ascent, the game's Cyber Heist DLC gives you a tempting reason to return to its detailed cyberpunk settings. Larian Studios' magnum opus has forever changed the RPG genre, and that includes visual fidelity you can expect from an isometric RPG. Baldur's Gate 3 features breathtaking art direction that perfectly captures its DD source material, all of which is brought to life with stellar lighting and texture work that you'd expect from a AAA title. While the game's isometric camera and turn-based combat might leave the impression that BG3 is easy to run, that couldn't be further from the truth. Larian recommends a 2060 Super and an R5 3600 for a smooth experience at 1080p. This holds until you enter the massive city of Baldur's Gate itself, wherein you'll need something comparable to a 2080 or 30 series card to achieve high refresh rates. The latest chapter in Lara Croft's story is more visually stunning and diverse than ever. The previous game was no piece of cake when it comes to system requirements, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider continues the tradition. Even at mediocre refresh rates, you won't be able to enjoy this game with anything less than a GTX 1060 graphics card combined with the brainpower of something like an i7 4770K processor. Its performance does scale quite well when pushed to higher resolutions, but you'll still want a 20 or 30 series RTX card from Nvidia if you plan to raid tombs in 1440p or 4K. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is benchmarked frequently for a reason. Forza Horizon 5 is one of the most stunning games released in 2021. Beautiful lighting, realistic car models, and incredible weather effects all make for an immersive experience that all racing fans can appreciate. It also makes for a rather demanding PC title. The recommended GPU for Horizon 5 is a GTX 1070, quite a large leap from Horizon 4's recommended GTX 970, and that's just for 1080p resolution running at 60 FPS. As reported by Digital Foundry, if you want to push Horizon 5 into 4K territory, you'll want at least an RTX 2080 Ti or an RTX 3070. You'll also want a stronger CPU to maintain a solid 60 FPS during this game's more performance-heavy races. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered and its sequel, Miles Morales, come to life on PC with updated visuals and unique settings. Features such as DLSS, upscaling options, ray tracing, and ultra-wide support make this the definitive version of Insomniac Games' superhero masterpieces. Indeed, this version of Spider-Man proves to be Sony's best port of a PlayStation game yet. Swinging across New York will take a toll on your PC on high settings, as expected. A GTX 1060 and Intel i5 4670 are required to play the game at solid frame rates, but those looking to play at 4K will need an Nvidia 30 or 40 series GPU. If you're sensitive to frame drops, this title supports Nvidia's DLSS 3.0 frame generating technology, one of very few PC games to support this feature. Jumping across rooftops and drop-kicking zombies has never looked so good. Dying Light 2 is a visual treat for start to finish, yet its recommended specs are nothing short of brutal. An RTX 2060 is recommended to play this game at 1080p with 60 FPS, but don't expect to run this game on high or ultra settings with a 2060. As great as Dying Light 2 looks, it is easily one of the most performance-heavy PC games on the market. Getting this game to run well on a 2060 will require playing the game with a mix of medium and high settings, as demonstrated with Digital Foundry's analysis of Dying Light 2's PC performance. If you're looking to play this game at 1440p at ultra settings, you'll need top-of-the-line hardware. It wasn't until 2018 that PC players could experience Final Fantasy XV for the first time. FF15's PC port features excellent scalability, but that visual fidelity comes at a price performance. With your settings cranked to the max, FF-XV is one of the most graphically demanding RPGs you can find, even when compared to more modern titles like Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield. Despite its age, Final Fantasy XV requires a monstrous PC to run at high refresh rates. That's because the recommended specs are for 30 FPS, not 60. Higher refresh rates will require a generational leap from your GPU and CPU. The only GPU that can run this game at 4K resolution with 120 FPS is a 4090. Not many last-gen titles can say the same. The Last of Us Part 1 got off to a rocky start for PC users. Naughty Dog's excellent story was sabotaged by a PC port with rampant bugs, memory leaks, and a voracious appetite for VRAM. The good news is that most of those issues have been fixed after its release. Even with optimization updates, TLOU is still a difficult game to run on most systems. You'll need an RTX 2070 Super paired with a Ryzen 5 3600X to hit the game's recommended specs, targeting 1080p resolution at 60 FPS. Thanks to DLSS and FSR2, it's possible to achieve higher FPS targets on mid-range systems without any major compromises to visual quality. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a highly demanding open-world title for most PCs. The minimum requirements alone ask for a GTX 1070 and Ryzen 5 3600 just to run the game at 1080p resolution at 30 FPS. This is an optimistic estimate, as the game's various hub towns place immense pressure on your system's CPU. The recommended settings aim for a 4K experience at 30 FPS, suggesting a system with at least an RTX 2080 and Ryzen 5 3600X, although a stronger CPU is needed for the game's hub areas. If you want to make use of ray tracing, then you'll need a 30 series RTX GPU or better. Resident Evil 4 Remake is the perfect remaster of a timeless classic. Capcom has overhauled the visuals of RE4 to deliver a much more immersive experience without compromising on the game's original tone and atmosphere. But as with all remakes, those graphical improvements come with higher system requirements. Capcom recommends a GTX 1070 and Ryzen 5 3600 to experience RE4 at 1080p 60 FPS. Certain sections can drop the frame rate below this, however, so a stronger GPU is recommended. This is especially the case if you plan to run high-resolution textures, as certain scenes can reserve up to 8 GBs of RAM. To avoid crashing at max settings, an RTX 3070 or higher is recommended. Star Wars Jedi Survivor launched with one of 2023's worst PC ports. The game's constant shader compilation stutters and poor GPU utilization led to a jittery, unplayable experience for many. Respawn has since released multiple post-launch patches to address these optimization issues. An RTX 2070 and Ryzen 5 5600X are recommended to run this game at 1080p. DLSS and FSR are also available for this title to greatly boost performance, and 40 series owners can use DLSS 3.0 frame generation for further performance gains. Despite its performance on console hardware, Red Dead Redemption 2's PC port is incredibly demanding even when compared to newer open-world titles. Stuttering and FPS dips are common on recommended hardware, although reducing your settings can help mitigate this. The recommended requirements aren't anything to laugh about either. For NVIDIA users, a GTX 1060 or above is absolutely crucial for a great experience. AMD users will need to opt for a Ryzen 5 1500X or above to get such results. Should you meet those requirements, you'll get to experience the most visually impressive Rockstar game to date with few issues. And for those with RTX 30 series cards, give this game a try at 1440p to give your GPU a serious workout. Metro Exodus supports real-time ray tracing technology and takes full advantage of NVIDIA's RTX graphics card lineup. Players planning on running the game on lower settings might have issues, as the game offers only a few possible tweaks to improve performance for lower-grade systems. Benchmarks by PC Gamer on lowest settings reveal an average of under 60 FPS on anything worse than a GTX 1070. Cranking everything up to the max is going to require an RTX card like the 2060 or above. It's not the most performance-heavy FPS on the market, but Metro certainly rewards powerful PCs with jaw-dropping visual fidelity and a great story. Unreal Engine 5 titles continue to raise the bar for graphical fidelity, and no game exemplifies this better than Ark Survival Ascended. This UE5 remake of Ark Survival Evolved takes advantage of UE5's Lumen and Nanite features to create a visually striking upgrade from the original. As with the game itself, you'll need a few upgrades before you can experience the joys of taming a T-Rex. The recommended specs suggest an RTX 3080 GPU and a Ryzen 5 3600X. You'd expect those specs to be tailored for 1440p, but in-game performance begs to differ. If you want to experience Ark at high resolutions and frame rates, you'll need a top-of-the-line PC and a little bit of luck. You're going to need a fairly powerful PC if you want to explore Cyberpunk's Night City. This game chews through your system memory, requiring at least a GTX 1060 and 12GB of RAM to play on minimum settings. If you want to bring out the beauty of Cyberpunk's dystopian setting, you'll want a rig that can handle ray tracing. The recommended specs can handle low RT, but you ideally want an RTX 3080 Ti or higher for a more noticeable lighting upgrade. Even with those specs, Cyberpunk will struggle to maintain a consistent frame rate at times. And if you want to play this game with path tracing at max settings, you'll need a powerhouse of a PC quite literally, as only the RTX 4090 and a top-tier CPU can run Cyberpunk at these metrics consistently. It might have become harder to run with Update 2.0, but there have never been more performance options at your disposal. DLSS, frame generation, and a plethora of settings have made it easier than ever to play Cyberpunk on modern systems. Alan Wake 2 has the most demanding PC specs we've seen since Cyberpunk 2077. The minimum specs alone list an RTX 2060 and Intel i5 7600K. Most games list those components under recommended specs. If you want to experience this game at 60 FPS, you'll need an RTX 3070 and Ryzen 7 3700X. For 4K resolution with ray tracing, you'll need an RTX 4080 or higher, and that's with DLSS set to performance. It only becomes clear when playing Alan Wake 2 as to why these requirements are so absurd. As Digital Foundry reported, Alan Wake 2 uses forms of software ray tracing to greatly improve the quality of its reflections and ambient occlusion. This makes the game visually striking at even the lowest settings, but Alan Wake 2 becomes downright photorealistic when you enable path tracing, a setting that only the RTX 4080 and 4090 cards can handle.